Chapter 76. Mo Wheeling was purposely clinging to him. Lisa glanced at them. One was tall and lanky, and the other was slender. The two of them actually seemed quite intimate as they stood closely to one another, and James was even carrying a small gift bag in his hand. The shop's name was drawn on the gift bag. It was called Carving Time. Lisa walked over in a few furious steps. She yanked James's arm all of a sudden and quietly pushed herself between the two of them. James. She lifted her head and smiled at James. Then she reached out her hand as she wanted to receive the item in his hand. What are you holding? Let me have a look. James subconsciously evaded her. It's nothing. Upon being averted, Lisa's face froze. She looked at James and pursed her lips. Didn't you bring someone along? Why do you still need to carry this? I'll help you carry it. James could not resist but stare at Sarah from the side. She stood there looking at the two of them. Her face seemed to be fairly serene. James said, "No need, it's nothing heavy." It was difficult for Lisa to say anything again. She could only bend her head and silently gaze at Sarah. Sarah did not know what she had done wrong to make Lisa detest her so much in such a short period. But thinking about it, it would have been even more odd for Lisa to like her. Lisa glanced at the two of them. Why are the two of you here? James said. Oh, we just came from eating dinner at the family estate. Once again, Lisa reproachfully turned her head and secretly peered at Sarah. Why did you walk back? James observed. We just walked back since we had nothing else to do. Why are you here? Lisa raised her head. She glanced at James with a face full of cuteness. She simply did not care that Sarah was still alongside her observing. I just wanted to buy something to eat. I didn't expect to see you two. James, there just happens to be a cafe over there. The ambiance is pretty lovely, frankly. Accompany me there so that we can sit inside, all right? Her eyes paused. She turned her head back and said to Sarah, Sarah, it's rare for us to bump into each other here. Let's go over together and sit inside for a bit. Sarah stared at James. She did not really want to intrude upon their quality time together. However, just when she was going to answer, "No, I'll go home first," she felt Lisa swiftly join her arm with hers as if wanting to be close to her. Let's go. We'll go there together and sit for a while. Sarah was simply drawn along. She leaned her head back speechlessly and gazed at James. However, James's expression was aloof as usual. She could not determine what exactly he was thinking. Sarah could only follow them into the cafe. After sitting down, Lisa automatically sat beside James. She looked at Sarah across from her, smiled, and said, What does Miss Sarah want to drink? Sarah said, I'm fine with anything. To be honest, she did not particularly like drinking coffee. She could not recognize the difference between the flavors of the different types of coffee. Lisa took authority and summoned a waitress over. She said bluntly, 3 Jamaican Blue Mountain coffees. Lisa grinned and said, James only likes drinking Blue Mountain coffee. The Blue Mountain coffee from this establishment is pretty authentic. Right, James? James could tell that Lisa was purposely leaning near to him. He could not help but be slightly unhappy. James said, Anything is fine. Lisa lifted her head to glance at James with a countenance filled of tenderness. James, you've even lost weight. Have you been growing fatigued recently? You have to care more about getting rest. Don't be so stressed about your job. Your health is the most important. James felt Lisa's hand rest on his arm. He automatically felt a little uncomfortable and averted her touch by going backward. He casually brushed aside her hand. Lisa knew that he was actually evading her. She became increasingly agitated and walked close so that she would be nearly leaning against his body. James's brow began to furrow noticeably. Even though he realized that Lisa had a childish temper and was purposely putting on a show for Sarah because she was envious, he still felt sad. She had gone little overboard by doing this. Again, Lisa appeared to suddenly remember that there was someone else besides them. She let out a dry cough and smiled at Sarah in embarrassment. Sarah lifted up the corners of her mouth and glanced at her casually. Although she felt uneasy in her heart, she nonetheless seemed cool on the surface, as if she was indifferent. Otherwise, what else could she do? Lisa and James were once a couple nonetheless. Sarah did not even need Lisa's targeted reminders right now to recognize this. Lisa smiled at Sarah and asked her as if she was truly frightened. Recently, I seem to have seen a lot of news about you. I still have to congratulate you. That television series looks to be doing pretty well. Sarah grinned as well. Thank you. Lisa answered. It's true that I don't understand the workings of artists like you, but I suppose that this is probably deemed successful as an artist. As she stated this, she touched her lips to the cup and gulped a mouthful of coffee. She appeared as if she felt herself superior, and her eyes held a tinge of unconcealed condescension. Sarah could not be bothered to put on a pretense in front of her. She raised her head haughtily and sneered. It's only just the beginning. I'm still very far away from achieving success. But ultimately, I'm still young, so I have a long journey ahead of me. Lisa had grown up together with James since they were kids. Her age was likewise remarkably identical to James's. Naturally, she was also substantially older than Sarah. No matter how well she took care of herself, the gap in age between her and Sarah might still be visible. When Lisa heard Sarah mention this, her countenance transformed quickly. But because Nathan was still alongside her, it was difficult for her to say anything. She could only suppress her rage. She grinned at Sarah and replied, Is that so? Then I'll congratulate you on your accomplishment in advance. But I didn't expect you to even know Nathan. It looks like your relationship with him is actually not bad, Sarah said neutrally. Yes, we're friends too. Nathan is really a good person. Lisa purposely stated. He's very nice to people and really knows how to look after them. You two even looked like quite a nice match on television. At this moment, James stood up immediately and commented sadly, That's enough, Lisa. It's time for us to go home too. Lisa's mood deteriorated fast. She stood up with a swishing sound as well and glanced at James fiercely. What's wrong, James? Right at that moment, James's phone started ringing. James glanced meaningfully at Lisa. He saw that the number was Ryan's. Afraid that anything had popped up, he went out first to answer the phone. After Lisa saw James leave, she turned back and glanced at Sarah. She said, Sarah, what exactly are you doing? Sarah sneered. She glanced at Lisa's looks change soon after James left. Her acting talents were very outstanding. Sarah said, What did I do? Lisa snorted and said, You made James carry things for you and even made him accompany you to walk on the streets at night. You know how perilous it is for James to undertake such a thing? Dangerous? Of course. Do you suppose that James is like you, a small artiste who has nothing at all? His life is worth more than 100 of yours. If something happens to him, do you realize what the repercussions will be? I just knew it. Living together with a commoner like you will sooner or later be disastrous for him. Sarah, if you want to die, it's up to you, but don't pull James along with you. Sarah scoffed as she glanced at Lisa. Miss Lisa, in your eyes is James just some vulnerable item that faces perpetual danger and can't go anywhere at all? Chapter 77. You definitely misunderstood. Her Lisa did not expect James to even dare to react. James said, That's right, I did come out to walk the streets with him and to go home together. That's because in my perspective, he's not a man who's in danger. He's a man who has the right to enjoy life and has the right to be an ordinary person. He's my husband, and the two of us share the same bed. Given our rank and relationship, there's no argument as to whether we can or cannot do something. He helped me carry groceries and accompanied me on a stroll because we're a married pair. Indeed, I don't understand the danger that you're talking about. Because in my opinion, he was never an important person. He's my hubby. Sarah's cheeks grew crimson with rage at James's words. James only snickered. So no matter how low I am in your eyes, I'm Ryan's wife. Great, Miss Sarah. I don't need you to condemn my life with Ryan. When she was finished, James turned around promptly and went. James only let out a breath when she came outdoors. She stood by the entrance and stared at the sky that was tinted fully neon. She was also pretty anxious about becoming a burden to Ryan. Because the distance in their lifestyles was so enormous, there were many things that she did not comprehend, and many things that she was bewildered about. She closed her eyes and sighed, before striding forward. However, when Ryan returned from outside, he discovered that only Sarah was remaining in the cafe. Upon seeing Ryan return, Sarah cried and sank into the table. Ryan froze before stepping over to question, "What happened?" "Sarah?" Sarah raised her head, her eyes shining with tears. "Ryan, I really don't want you to live together with James anymore." Ryan grimaced as he glanced at her. "What happened?" Sarah glanced at him helplessly and pitifully. "Do you know what James did to me just now?" Ryan's brow twitched. "What did she do?" "She told me that it was you and her who are husband and wife. Whatever she does is always correct, and whatever I do is always incorrect. She and you have an equal relationship. Then what am I? Ryan, am I the third party? But evidently, you and I are a pair." Why did she say this to me? Why did she hurt me like this? Ryan lowered his eyes to glance at her. Did she really say that? Yes. Sarah said, "If you don't believe it, you can go and ask her if she said that the two of you are the married couple. When you were here, she did not even say a word. The second you left, she instantly started saying something like this to me. What precisely does she mean?" "That's enough, Sarah. I think you misunderstood what she said." Ryan said. "That's impossible," Sarah answered. "I'm not a fool either. I heard what she said plainly, word for word." "Why, Ryan? Could it be that you don't believe me?" Ryan sighed. He sat down and glanced at her. "No. I just sense that she's not that kind of person. You probably misjudged her. That's why you mistook her statements." "All right, Sarah. Don't cry anymore." However, Sarah bit her lips and felt even more upset. "Sure, let's go," Ryan said. "I'll get someone to take you home." "You're not coming with me?" Sarah remarked dolefully as she lifted her little face. Ryan did not see James. He was anxious to find out where James had gone and what exactly had transpired. He was somewhat scared that she was unhappy, so after contemplating for a minute, he nevertheless said to Sarah, "I'll look for you tomorrow again. Right now, I still have an essential problem to deal to." Sarah recalled that he had gone out in a flurry earlier to answer a call. She assumed that he probably did have an urgent matter. She thought to herself that she was surely not like James, who was not conscious of his demanding schedule. She softly hooked her arm through his. She was careful not to touch his body so as to avoid him from bursting out in a rash. However, she also longed to feel his body heat. She glanced at his completely stunning looks and said quietly to him, "In that case, go ahead and attend to your matters. Don't tire yourself out too much. I won't be able to bear it. I realize that you're busy, so I won't interrupt you." Ryan sucked in a large breath and mumbled to her, "Go home." Remember to look for me tomorrow once you're free. I'll be waiting for you." "All right," Ryan agreed earnestly. After Sarah left, Ryan wondered where James had gone. In no time, his subordinates dragged him along, and together they discovered James, who was roaming alone by the side of the road in the direction of their home. Ryan came up with James and said, "Why did you leave on your own?" James believed that he would have to pacify Sarah for quite a duration. Seeing that he had come over so swiftly, she mumbled perplexedly, "Why didn't you properly accompany Sarah and chat with her?" Seeing that Sarah had been so unhappy, James also recognized that Sarah would absolutely not have anything positive to say about her once she departed. Ryan lifted his eyebrows and glanced at her. "Why? Did you want us to chat for longer?" James said. "Yes, it was rare for you to have wandered into each other. You're really so thoughtful." Should he compliment her for being such a generous and good wife? James glanced at him. "Of course that's the case. My personality is just... I forgot how the idiom goes. It's applied to characterize someone who's generous. More tolerance will make you a bigger person?" Yes, it describes me exactly." Ryan lowered his head and skimmed his gaze over her chest. Your breasts are big." James looked down and covered herself. "Get lost, you hoodlum." Ryan broke into a smile. He only calmed when he noticed that she was not unhappy. However, he recalled what Sarah had said and tilted his head to question her. "You told Sarah just now that we're a married couple, so whatever we do is always right?" She simply knew that Sarah would not say anything favorable about her. She did not seem to have articulated it in that way, but there was no problem with construing it as this either. Yes, is that not the case? James purposefully acted foolish and tilted her head to look at him. Ryan glanced at James, blinking her eyes innocently with her face tilted. She looked incredibly adorable, and Ryan helplessly shook his head. Yes, yes, yes. Your statements were right. Lisa answered. Of course. You're my husband, and I'm your wife. Didn't you often state that we're a married pair and that it's only appropriate for you to look after me? So, taking me on a stroll and helping me hold objects are things a husband should do. Isn't that right, hubby? She was becoming bolder with him. She grabbed on his arm when she went up to him and swung it back and forth. Tell me, hubby, am I not right? Ryan felt his heart about to melt. He couldn't help but smile and stare at her. Okay, you're right. Only then did Lisa smile. She understood that they had almost reached Ryan's villa. The two of them stepped in together. Once inside, Lisa happily brought out the mound of homemade soaps they had manufactured. Although they appeared a bit strange, the colors were nonetheless really lovely. She honestly felt a little reluctant to use them. Ryan observed from behind her and pointed out the ones Lisa had created. These are really awfully ugly. That's impossible. This is called art. Do you understand it or not? It's just like Picasso's work. This is dubbed abstract art. Ryan shook his head. You're so bad with your hands and feet. Worse still, you always have an excuse for everything. Lisa turned to glare at him. A maid watched them from the side. Seeing how delighted they were, she couldn't help but scream, Madam, sir, did you make these? They look quite good. Lisa hastily turned her head. Yes, I made all the nice-looking ones. The horrible ones were made by Ryan. She took up the soaps and peered at them. What am I going to do? I can't bear to utilize any of them. Ryan went in close and said, There's no reason for you to hesitate. We can always create more in the future. He scooped up a Few grinned and looked at her name on the soaps. Then he turned to her and said, You use the ones I made, and I'll use the ones you made. Upon hearing this, Lisa's face instinctively flushed crimson red. Ryan bowed his head and said, When you use it, won't you feel like I'm touching you all over your body? Chapter 78. I'll do whatever I want to. Lisa was sitting at the side. She could feel James's body heat get stronger. He was standing immediately behind her, his body pushed against her back. He could even smell the perfume of shampoo from her head. Although she obviously used the same shampoo and body wash as he did, he thought that the aroma on her body was different. The perfume seemed to be combined with the fragrance of a woman. He felt as if the scent was encircling his nose and going deep into his heart. He instantly moved somewhat closer again. He lowered his head and the tip of his nose nearly brushed her hair. Lisa sat rigidly erect. As she sensed his breathing, she did not dare to move another inch. The servants in James's home were all pretty intelligent. Seeing that the two of them were here, the maid secretly retreated in no time. Only the two of them were left in the room. From above, James stared at the white and pristine expanse of her neck. He felt the temptation to partially touch it. Lisa could sense a hot hand inexorably getting closer to her. Thus, she twisted her head forcefully and gazed at James behind her. She frowned at him and asked, Hey, James, what are you doing? Upon being caught red-handed while trying to touch her discreetly, James momentarily felt ashamed. But when he observed Lisa's inquiring stare, he raised his eyebrows and inquired gently, What am I doing? Lisa swept her eyes over his hand. Stop groping me behind my back. Lisa, we're a married couple. How can you call this groping? Of course this is groping, you hoodlum. James's face was pulled tight. In a minute, he was sitting before Lisa so closely that she became immediately surprised. She merely felt James instantly cuddle up to her and fast kiss her once on her lips. It was like a dragonfly skimming across the water, but it still made her feel flaming hot. Lisa's face instantly turned into the color of a red apple. James felt that he really very much appreciated how Lisa was so sensitive. Her face seemed as if it would break upon being pushed. Her skin was so delicate and blushed crimson so rapidly. Immediately, Lisa leaned aside and moved slightly further from his face. James said, "You're my wife. I'll kiss you if I want. Do you get that? Get lost, hoodlum!" Lisa covered her mouth and yelled. Wickedness blazed on James's face. His gaze followed her exquisite neck and continued downwards. "If I'm a hoodlum, I won't just stop here. You honestly expect me to behave like one?" "You..." James erupted into a smile and directly kissed her lips. Lisa let out a low breath. She merely felt the tip of his tongue high-handedly strip her of all her air. Although it was not ideal for James to be in close contact with females owing to his sickness, he reflexively ran his hand up her frontal chest and gripped at it. He fumbled at it and lightly kneaded it. His respiration gradually began to quicken. Her body was really too soft. It looked to make him despise that he could not knead it into a pulp. Lisa felt him exert more force. The lethargic feeling of agony was accompanied by a tremendous electric current. It made her body begin tingling as well. She instinctively whined. Her body turned limp from time to time. Her body was virtually relaxing in his hands. Her hands involuntarily came up to rest on his shoulders. However, she felt his hands move to her back and touch her all over. James felt his body burning terribly. Hot. The lust that was nearly about to erupt out of his body was exceedingly hard for him to handle. He honestly wanted to just forget everything else and devour her now. However, right at this moment, he heard someone beating on the door outside. His face flushed pink. James released the woman in his embrace with a lot of struggle. He inquired forcefully in the direction of the door. "What happened?" "Sir, first young master is here." Richard was here? James could only let go of her for the moment. As he glanced at Lisa's fully scarlet face, he could not help but give it one final gentle peck again before he rose up swiftly. He did not take another look at her so as not to instantly lose control and just seize her. Lisa was still in a daze. She understood that James had wrenched open the door and escaped. Her face was tinged brilliantly crimson and full of bashfulness. She pinched herself once viciously. Was she dreaming? This James? What specifically was he doing? James came down, the steps step by step. Sure enough, he saw Richard down below. Outside, the bodyguards from the National Security Agency were awaiting orders. It appeared like they were here on official business. "Big brother, this had better be something important." Richard stared at James as he walked down. "Why? Did I disturb something good?" James's eyebrows flew up. "Naturally, I'm not a bachelor like Big Brother. I'm someone who got married. Of course, I don't let just anyone into my house. Next time, can you at least give me a heads up in advance?" Richard grinned and shook his head as he glanced at James. "All right, I understand. For a moment, I forgot that you're already married. But because you appear to be loving your married life right now next time, I'll strive to get adapted to it too." James sat down together with Richard. Only then did Richard set the tablet computer in his palms in front of James. "Someone sent this to me." James bent his head and peered at it. It was Richard on the bed with a woman. It appeared like it had probably been taken in secret. However, although the two of them could not be labeled fully naked, their cloths were disheveled. Still, what they had just witnessed was plain. James instantly lifted his gaze up. "What happened here?" Richard sighed. "I suspect that he may have even worse clandestine photos because on that day, Richard looked down and massaged his brow. Immediately, James understood. Even more stunning occurrences had unfolded on that day. Is there a mole among the bodyguards in the National Security Agency? If not, how could anyone have photographed such a picture? Investigations are already ongoing. Right now, the essential problem is to figure out how to rectify this situation." "Who is this woman?" James asked amusedly. "I didn't expect Big Brother to even have a private life." Richard raised his head and glanced at him coolly. "It's Olivia." James's gaze drifted lower. After the two of them had addressed formal affairs, James walked him out. "I'll get people to investigate this matter." Richard could not gather his own forces to examine this topic while avoiding being found. It would just complicate their position. Thus, he needed James to make a move. Richard nodded. James replied, "If that's not possible, why won't Big Brother just marry her?" No one can say anything about what Mr. President does with his own wife. Richard glanced at him. No way. James smiled and said, Why? Problems with her profession? A manager will have blots on her reputation? Or is it her family affairs that are complicated? Richard said, I investigated her before. Her family is fairly ordinary, but her family troubles are highly problematic. She has a younger sibling who relies exclusively on her employment to finance his school expenditures. That's not a problem. At all. The crux is that she has a father who likes to gamble. James was bewildered as he glanced at Richard. Looks like we still have to give this matter more thought, but it's apparent that she's definitely a civilian. The advice I made the last time will actually still be effective. It just depends on whether you embrace it or not. What? Getting married to a civilian. It's extremely helpful for your number of votes in the election this time. Richard glanced at him meaningfully. Without replying, he walked outside. Chapter 79. It's nothing. Go to sleep. James walked inside while mumbling, Emily? In no time, he returned to Lisa's room. She did not even dare to look at James and kept diverting his sight. James stared at Lisa and asked, On that day, why did you and your manager go to the hotel that Nathan was staying at? Lisa raised her head and stopped before saying, Oh, you're talking about that day. It was Nathan's treat that day. Everyone went to rejoice together after the closing celebration. I brought Sister Emily along with me. Nathan took us there, because the motel is operated by the Ryan family. Who knew that Mr. President went there too? James sat down in intense concentration. Everything appeared like it happened naturally. It was probably not some scheme. The reason Emily appeared there was even because of the third youngest brother of their own family. Furthermore, since Emily's past had already been thoroughly studied, it was probably confirmation that there was no real risk. It could not be an act of espionage. But was Emily really not involved? Lisa gazed at James perplexedly. Why did you start asking about this all of a sudden? James raised his head and smiled. It's nothing. Go to sleep. Okay. Because he did not talk about it, Lisa did not shoot her mouth off and ask him. The next day. The television series was already midway through its airing. Lisa's character was growing more and more unhappy. A significant number of people flocked to Lisa's Weibo profile to vent their emotions. A lot of people believed that the character Chen Yihan, which Lisa played, was genuinely having a really awful time. She was observant of people in every area, was easygoing and dashing, and never dragged things out no matter what she did. However, she turned out to get wounded in the end each time. In fact, because the horrific happenings of late were all happening, to Lisa, all of the attention on the female lead had plummeted dramatically. Outside, individuals were starting to sensationalize and smear mud on Lisa's name. They said that Lisa was going to win the competition against the female lead and become the person who gained most from this television series. Fortunately, on Sarah's end, they pretended that this had not happened and made no comment at all either. On the contrary, a considerable group of Sarah's followers gathered to curse at Lisa for no cause. As she looked at these comments, she was also slightly agitated. It's seriously weird. All of these items were written by the screenwriter. It has nothing to do with me. It's only because the primary events in the plot recently are related to me. Ultimately, I'm still only a supporting character. Why did they all come to curse at me? Lisa grumbled to Emily when they were on their way to attend a promotional activity. Emily gazed at the paperwork in her hands. Since she had more experience, her reaction to occurrences like these was a lot calmer than Lisa's. Of all, she was not the one getting cursed at, and she, in truth, did not feel furious as soon as Lisa did. With everyone in the same production, it's inevitable that there'll be someone who hates to see you receive good reviews and will intentionally smear mud on your reputation. However, it's also not uncomplicated to investigate who it is. Everyone is a competitor, therefore it may be anyone. Investigating it will be of no darn benefit either. Emily gazed at Lisa. Anyway, just remember this. If you yourself become famous, that will be the greatest blow to your opponents, Lisa nodded. I understand, Sister Emily. Very quickly after, they arrived at the event venue. This was a talk show. The chief creators took this advertising effort quite seriously because Sarah was arriving today as well. They believed that Sarah and Nathan would become a significant subject, so they purposefully arranged for Lisa to step up on stage just later so she would not steal screen time from the female lead. Lisa gazed at Sarah and Nathan sitting together. When it came to work, the two of them were still very professional. They flirted with one another and really played their parts. Sarah also proven herself to be a veteran. On stage, she appeared quite composed and carried the flow of the program pretty well too. Right at this moment, Olivia stepped over to her from behind. She gazed in front, snickered, and added, "Why did I hear that you're about to be suppressed?" Lisa rolled her eyes and twisted her head. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Olivia glanced at her with a face full of innocence. "Why? Isn't that the case? I totally heard that you pressed on generating publicity with Nathan because you wanted to get famous. Ultimately, the attention on you nearly repressed the attention Sarah got. Hence, you insulted Sarah." Lisa, I must add that you're too eager for immediate success and instant advantages. Among these guys who've been in the industry for long, which one of them doesn't have any backing? And which one of them doesn't have more tricks than you? Still, you insist on putting yourself above the female protagonist and the supporting characters in a television series? Can't you just properly execute your supporting role? Lisa frowned at Olivia. She glanced at her venomous gaze and smiled, sadly. "You really know it so clearly," Olivia snickered. "Didn't you see? Even Sarah didn't want you to make buzz with Nathan today. She purposefully separated the two of you for the purpose of the interviews." Lisa glared at her. She then noticed Sarah coming down. Olivia ran forward to embrace her. "Sister Sarah, you completed your earlier interview so well. Our company repeatedly instructed me to learn from you. They remarked that Sister Sarah is very capable and even knows particularly well how to deal with reporters." Sarah grinned slightly. "Honestly, I'm not. You're being too polite." Seeing that Sarah was conversing to her, Olivia quickly smiled. She turned back to scowl at Lisa before leaning further forward to earn favor with Sarah. Lisa merely thought that she had enough of Olivia. She glanced at her and did not speak. Then Sarah noticed Lisa. She smiled as she stepped over and said, "Lisa, I didn't see you earlier." Lisa quickly grinned. "Really? I was sitting here all along." Sarah came up and talked brightly. To Lisa, "You performed pretty well in this television series. I think you're extremely qualified to portray brave characters like these." "Thank you for your compliment, Sister Sarah. Really, your performance was very natural. If Sister Sarah compliments me even more, my face will turn completely red." At this moment, the reporters observed the two of them speaking, passionately and rapidly captured photographs of them from distance. Sarah observed, "Nathan has only ever complimented very few people. Earlier, he continued praising you. Tsk, tsk. Lisa, you're probably one of the few individuals he glances at. His taste is really awful. Should I reflect on myself?" Sarah began to laugh out loud. Olivia looked on from behind and was horrified. Just like this, Sarah left her hanging dry here. However, she herself had gone immediately to start speaking with Lisa. Sure enough, news of this was released the next day. It said that Sarah was speaking cheerfully with Lisa, dispelling the allegations that they were not on good terms. Sarah also publicly declared that she felt that Lisa was a very real and really simple-minded girl. And in the primary frame, Lisa and Sarah were standing close to one another. At the back, Olivia was completely reduced to a background figure. Upon viewing the headline, Olivia was so outraged that she nearly tossed the tablet computer into the ground. Do these reporters have brains? On the other hand, Emily looked at the news and said to Lisa, who was still in the car, "The reason why Sarah can support you is probably because of Nathan." Lisa answered, "But why did she help me?" First of all, she probably doesn't hate you. Otherwise, she may have just sat on her laurels and simply let the outside world guess. There's no reason for her to waste her efforts. Secondly, she's originally not a somebody who likes to stir up trouble. Furthermore, she's an intelligent person. She won't allow anybody to make use of her for no cause. This time, it was apparent that someone was exploiting her to tarnish your reputation, so of course she wasn't happy. Lisa lowered her head in understanding. Chapter 80. It feels good to be worshipped. There was nothing much recently. Rest more at home and have a look at these scripts. Emily began to hurl a big pile of scripts at Lisa. Looking over the pile, she gently questioned, "What are all of these?" Emily added, "These are for roles we hope you'll play. We're still looking. You can examine them, and if there's any that interests you, let me know." "Wow, so many!" Lisa exclaimed with amazement. Emily grinned and said, "These are not even all of them. The ones we selected for you are all fantastic female lead roles. They won't go wrong." Top female lead? Yes, I'm not giving you supporting roles anymore. The first step was a supporting role. Now it's time for the following phase, which is to make you a lead actress in a television drama for you to shine. Thus, these scripts are highly significant. Take your time to pick. The couple strolled side by side. Emily's phone quickly rang. Emily gazed at the number, and her countenance progressively shifted. She turned to smile at Lisa and then walked ahead to answer the phone on her own. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Daughter, my good daughter, I have resolved to turn over a fresh leaf. All these years, I have let you down. I let you and your brother suffer. I'm going to cease gambling from now on." Emily listened to the solemn vows over the phone and curled her lips in a smile. "Tell me, how much did you lose this time? How much money do you want me to give you?" "Not much. Not much, really. This time I got cheated by someone. During the last game. I'm not interested in your stories, just tell me the result. How much do you owe?" 30,000. 30,000. Dad, that's a couple months' worth of my pay. "My daughter, your father only has you. You have to help me. Otherwise, they're going to exploit your mother to pay the debt. You..." Emily took a large breath. "For Mom. Dad, I'm merely doing this for my mom and brother. Please leave them alone, will you? Can you divorce Mom?" Are you still my daughter?" Emily hung up. When she returned outdoors, Lisa noted that Emily seemed a little flustered. She questioned, "Emily, are you okay?" Emily smiled. "I'm okay. I just have personal matters. Go back and look at the scripts. I won't send you off." Lisa nodded as her eyes landed on Emily. "Emily, I feel that you're rather mysterious. Sometimes." "What?" Emily laughed. Lisa said, "I've worked with you for so many years, but I've never heard you mention anything about your family or your personal life, as a matter of fact. Everybody claims you're a workaholic." Emily glanced at Lisa. "And I have never told anyone that you're Lisa Carter's sister and a lady from the Carter family." Lisa startled and instantly looked down, laughing dryly. "I always felt that there's nothing much to say about that. There's no point. It's better if I fight for myself and move away from those individuals and the past." Emily said, "And that is why I've always liked you. You're not vengeful. What you said is right. There's no need in saying anything. So neither have I. Remember, this society doesn't applaud failure. I never let anyone bear what I can handle alone. I don't want to burden people when they already have their own issues. And I don't want to rub salt to my wounds." Emily waved her hand for Lisa's automobile to take her up. Lisa turned back and glanced at Emily. She was walking back into the building. Her back view felt rather lonely as she constantly put up a strong, sturdy expression. It was so significantly different. Lisa brought her pile of scripts home. James saw that Lisa was carrying something and asked for someone to aid her. "What are these?" James asked. Lisa replied, "The company is letting me choose scripts." James gingerly lifted one up. The title read, "Golden Affections." What an awful name. Lisa sat on the sofa and dumped the scripts on the table, casually flipping through them. James sat on the other side and also took the scripts to see. "I'll help you see," James vowed. "You can choose from all of these?" "Yes," Lisa gazed at him blankly. "Do you know what to look for in all of these?" James said, "I have a master's degree from McGill College." Lisa added, "Literature and acting are completely different. But they're both arts. There must be something in common." Lisa grabbed her papers and raised her head to stare at James with wonder. "But why would a bronze-stinking businessman like you study literature?" James added without looking up, I also have a PhD from Harvard Business School, a master's degree from Yale School of Psychology and Law, and I studied management and economics at MIT. It's too unfortunate that I only had enough time to get a bachelor's degree. Lisa held both her palms up at him, her expression overflowing with appreciation. Oh, you philomath. Let me bow down to you. James raised his head. Philomath? Lisa said. It's someone who likes to study, James answered. I see. Lisa asked seriously, but how could you learn so many things with such little time? Doesn't university take 4 years? How did you study everything? James said, don't you know? There are some universities that allow you to pursue more than one subject at a time. But what's the point of studying so much? Everything is naturally of use. It's better to know some stuff. I don't get it. Indeed, because of your brain's capacity, you won't get it. Hey, James, I'm a university graduate myself. You graduated from university? James glanced at her incredulously. Lisa questioned, didn't you say you checked my entire background before we got married? My assistants didn't report that kind of unnecessary information to me. Did that mean her schooling was unnecessary? Lisa said spitefully. I graduated from theater school. It's also a true major. Oh, really? James lifted an eyebrow. Lisa felt a little embarrassed. Of course I graduated. Really? Then how much was your scholarship worth? Lisa felt even more guilty. She pursed her lips and thought of what to say. James smiled and observed, it looks like you didn't pass after all. No way. My graduation score was 61 points. It's a pass. James furrowed his brow. 61 points. Lisa, you're such a bad student. Lisa took a moment to realize that he was making fun of her. Aren't you a cunning businessman? Don't you like cunning businessmen like me? James inched closer to her, wanting to reach across and squeeze her cheek. The truth was that he did not belittle her outcomes. He only thought that it was more fun to provoke her. It was her admiring smile that made him burst with arrogance. It made him feel amazing.